But yeah, the first topic, like I said, is going to be about Microsoft laying off journalists to replace them with AI. Um, Subhead reads that Microsoft News and MSN is increasingly being run by robots. The this all comes from the idea of, trying to implement artificial intelligence in more places that can be automated when it should be automated, or when they can just, release workload so they don't have to pay for employees and they can put them somewhere else. But basically, what they're essentially doing is, the front page of MSN and Microsoft News is ultimately going to become a artificial intelligence based front page system. So whenever you go to that front page, most of the news is going to come from whatever the AI deems relevant for you to for you as a person, as a account. When you have your Outlook account, what is it? Outlook, Microsoft, what is it? They have an Outlook account, MSN.com, Hotmail.com,
Hotmail,
and
still got Hotmail.
and live.com. Like, they got all these different platforms because they've been trying to reinvent themselves like 50 times. And even back when it was just MSN.com, and then they had like the MSN browser with that freaking colorful butterfly.
Yeah.
Like they try to put news out there, and for a while I guess they had like news, like an actual newsroom where they had journalists that would vet the news and go through all the channels to say which one was what. And I'm guessing they probably tried to create a news website and, have their own journalists writing the news based on what they found out there, and, probably picking off of other news sources. But I mean, I don't know. I know when it comes to me, I use Google News, and Google News essentially is an artificial based system, and it's sort of redundant for Google News to have, because Google's not writing the news. They basically get all their news from like New York Times and The Verge, or wherever a news official news source is. So like for them, it's kind of no need to have a newsroom when all of those other companies have newsrooms. All you got to do is vet what they already put out there. Like if they put it out and, you have an AI that is associated with each user, whatever user is interested in whatever particular news, you just have that AI go out and do the fishing for them and find the news for them and give them the best stuff that they feel like is most relevant for them. But I don't see, there being a point in actually having anybody curate a particular homepage anymore. Like that's kind of old school, where everybody's seeing the same page.
Right.
Kind of like what newspapers used to be, where everybody got the same front page. Everybody got the same news.
Right. I mean, I think it has to do with, one, just them leaning, and they say this in the article too, that Microsoft has had this big push for AI in the past like couple months or so. It has something to do with that. It's different agendas that they're all melding together for this. And I think the bigger overarching thing is maybe not mentioned as much in this article, is that a lot of the news that the people get nowadays comes from social media. So and we live in a state where to those who they want to consume the news, or just people who consume information, there's always a debate between what's real and what's not. And I think that's where the AI comes into play, is like checking sources for what's valid news or not. But I think a lot of it is just, honestly, I don't really, when I go to like the homepage on like the new, even with the new browser they have, right? Microsoft Chrome, they call it. Oh, that's the
Microsoft
the other
Chrome.
name for it, right? Yeah, right. Right for that. But what is it for? Edge, I guess you want to call it 2.0, the new Edge. Some of the news that they have up on there, if I'm looking at it right, and sometimes even when I'm using like Internet Explorer on my computer, what is it, my job computer, I don't ever pay attention to the news that's there. You know what I mean? Like honestly, me as a consumer, most of the time when I get news, it either comes from somebody that's streaming something ridiculous that Trump is saying on CNN at the time, on Facebook or IG, or just it can be different information like we're saying here. They these different syndicates of these different platforms that have their news links posted on either by the people or by that actual or by that company's profile they posting it on like Facebook or in LinkedIn or something. So
Right.
with all of that going on, I think that it's becoming at its core from a business standpoint. I think this is about, in this instance, saving money, in which, looking at what the competition is, right? Like you just said, that was an excellent point, Mike. Looking at what Google has done, that's what they do. They just pretty much pull news from different sources and qualify this as, you say this is Google News because this is what Google has organized as the news for its platform. So, I mean, I think it's a good push. I know some of the stuff in here they ask is it about are they laying off because of COVID times? And I don't think Microsoft is hurting so much from COVID like a lot of other companies. Like you found out in these times, man, a lot of companies was living check by check. Which I know. I mean, because when that thing hit, they was out.
Microsoft is $1 trillion company. They ain't going nowhere.
Right. It was that we ain't gonna talk about it too much, but I know you said it in another show, Mike. They already had the 6 juggernauts at the table on
four juggernauts.
It was
and that was the thing,
Bezos,
like during the whole Congress thing, like Tech Congress, they had Jeff Bezos, they had Amazon, they had Apple, they had Facebook, and they had Google there, and Microsoft was able to skirt under all of that. Most of that, and most of that comes from the fact that Microsoft, they already had gone through an antitrust issue back in 2000, a long time ago, when it came to Internet Explorer and Netscape. That was like an old issue. So they already, they already had gone through antitrust. And the other issue is, Microsoft collects people's data, but they're not number one at collecting anybody's data. Yeah, Facebook is collecting your data, Amazon is collecting your data, Google is collecting your data, and Apple, they say they're not collecting your data, but they collecting the data that you allow them to collect, and they heavily collecting that.
They in cahoots with a lot of people that's collecting data.
If you're using Facebook, you're using Google, you're using Amazon, you're probably using it on an Apple device. So that's your business right there. So they don't necessarily need to collect it directly. They are the arbiters of where you collect it from. That's the thing for them. But like Microsoft, they really don't make that much. They make a lot. No, I'm not gonna lie. They make like a couple million, but they don't make the billions off of ads. Yeah, they ain't making billions off of advertisement and collecting data. They trying to, they want to, they wish they could.
They want some of that ad money.
It keeps them in a safe position not to collect everybody's data. Like, Google is in a bad position right now because that's 90% of their money is selling ads.
Yeah. And I want to speak too about the whole AI. We already know that I think that Microsoft is flying below the radar when it comes to that. You never know that all of what's being collected, But as far as what's publicly out there, be it that, for instance, like Google, they are like the information collecting, like search engine juggernauts. Like they don't. That's what they do. So of course they're going to be under fire all the time. But even with Microsoft, they got to be doing some type of collecting stuff.
Even in this instance right here. With the news being that it's going to be a completely automated system. As a user of Microsoft, as soon as you sign into your account, that means that you're basically giving them the right to at least monitor your news activity. So they're going to know the type of news articles that you like to be interested in, because you're going to click on it and you're going to read it and you're going to go back to it. Like me personally, I tend to not use Facebook for my news. I tend to watch my news. I'll go to Google News on my phone as a phone app, and I'll scroll through my news from there, mostly because I don't like Facebook's the way they track people. So like if I put my news on there, then they'll know the type of news that I'm also interested in. Besides like local news for, local concerns, communicating with the local community, I really don't put my news directly on Facebook. I don't get my news directly from Facebook. I usually get it from a news app. But yeah, even the news apps are tracking you, so it don't really matter.
Bad, because I do.
Yeah. I've been
using Facebook.
You can find it on there. You can definitely find it on there, and you can find. And the reason I don't use it mostly is because of the social commentary. Like if I just want straight news and I don't really care what anybody talking about, But if I wanna go, like, I'll use that. If I want to actually know what the community thinks about the news, then maybe, and then I'll find an article. I'll find it because it's not hard to find any news on Facebook. I'll find it on there just to see what the people are talking about, like the comments, because that's what Facebook is really about, the people. So
The commentary.
talking about, the commentary about a particular piece of news. So I'll sift through it and find it for that piece. But if I'm just looking for straight news, and I just I'm like, when I go, like, I ain't been going anywhere too much because of this thing, but like, because everything shut down. But like, if I'm going sitting at like a doctor's office or something, got 15 minutes to burn, I'll throw on the news app, just see what the news is. And I don't need to talk about it. I don't want to talk to nobody. I just want to see what the news is.
See what's being said.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
View.
Yeah, I don't want to know what the comments are. I just want to see the news.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense, man. I mean, as far as getting that pure unadulterated, like news, I would say too, like about the article, with them getting rid of the idea of getting rid of journalists, kind of dips into that whole idea of, like what we were talking about in the previous show with the, or in the other show with the Weekly Tech Rapper, this AI having its hand in something that deals with like creative, because I mean, although journalism, it has its creative sides, right? It's like half and half. Like, of course, it's journalism based off of like real life things, like news, stuff like that. But then too, like what we get from what makes it more juicy, or the same. Say we take the same subject of like news, whatever's being talked about, it can be talked about. It can be worded and given to you in a different way where it becomes digestible to you, where it may not be like that for someone else. So I think eliminating that element of it is something that we can tread light. I think they should tread lightly on, because at that point, I think if you're just pulling in a whole lot of things, you can almost become like just like white noise. You know what I mean? But
yeah, I mean that's why they're using the AI, because with the like the artistry of journalism and what Microsoft does, those are technically two different things. Like, really, Microsoft doesn't really do too much news themselves directly. So for them to have direct journalists, it doesn't really make sense. They can keep the creativity of journalism with the actual news organizations. I mean, like, if they are the Times, if they are the Sun, then they can stay with those news organizations and be journalists there. What scares me is when those news organizations that come about decide to use AI to write articles. Like using AI to sort articles is one thing, but using AI to write articles, like, that's the part that scares me, is like when they like, what, we'll just have some AI look at 5 articles that somebody else wrote from 5 other news sources, and the AI will read those and then write its own article based on that news from the 5 other news sources. Like, that's the part that scares me. Like, similar, like we were just talking about with the Congress thing, having all those CEOs at the Congress at Congress, like 30 articles was written about that stuff. So a 31st news article could technically have an AI read all those 30 news articles and then rewrite a 31st news article and send that out. And like, at that point, it's sort of like, well, at what level do you actually need a journalist, or at what level do you need that much news? We got all those news sources anyway. But at the same time, when do you actually need the artistry of journalists versus just having some artificial intelligence write stuff? Like, you still need people to do investigative research. And that's the part of journalism that gets overlooked, like the investigation part.